Suppose there was no Bible, and all we Christians had as a guide for living were oral stories handed down from the days of Jesus and the apostles. And let's further suppose that some of our world's leading pastors and church leaders decided to come together and create a Christian handbook that would serve as a guide for the believers, one that would be sent to every church and that would serve as a standard for our common faith and Christian practices and theology. Well, certainly they would not neglect salvation, and they would plainly and thoroughly write about how a man or a woman can be saved through faith in Jesus, believing in his death on the cross for the sins of the world and his resurrection 3 days later. But what would be written about marriage? What would they say? And how large of a section in this new Christian guidebook would be given to that topic? Judging from how many sermons have been preached on marriage, how many seminars have been dedicated to marriage, how many videos created, how many workshops held, how many adult Sunday school classes, how many home group gatherings that have focused on marriage, I think we could safely say that if our world's leading pastors and theologians were writing a manual on Christian living, marriage would receive a very large section indeed. The subject would be covered from A to Z with no possible marital issue left untouched. I find it interesting that God does not cover this subject nearly as thoroughly in the Bible as we would if we were writing about it in some kind of a Christian manual today. It's not that God says nothing about marriage, of course, in the Scriptures. He tells men to love their wives and encourages women to submit to and respect their husbands. He says he hates divorce, and Jesus tells us that what God has joined together, no man should put asunder or dissolve, apart from cases where there is sexual immorality. So, yeah, the subject of marriage is definitely covered in the Bible, but not nearly to the degree that we would cover it if we were doing it today. The marriage relationship is unique among all human relationships. It's more intense. It involves the physical act of sex, and it is supposed to last, as they say in the ceremony, as long as you both shall live. Our relationships with our children nearly always comes to a point where we no longer see them daily once they get married themselves and move out of the house. And friends, well, they'll come and they'll go in and out of our lives. But when we say I do or I will, we are committing ourselves to stay with that spouse for just as long as we are both breathing and living. Whether in our 20s or in our 80s, we are, or at least we should be, committed to living together, eating together, solving problems together, laughing together, and sometimes even arguing together. We do not get to choose our parents or our children, but we can definitely choose our spouses. And considering the length of this commitment, we'd better choose wisely. So, considering just how important marriage is, why doesn't God go into much more detail about it in His Word? Why does He give such simple instructions to husbands and wives? Imagine if someone wrote a book about marriage which contained exactly 1 page where he gives 4 instructions to husbands and wives. Number 1, don't marry an unbeliever. 2, husbands, love your wives. 3, wives, respect your husbands. And 4, don't get divorced. I don't think that such a book would make the New York Times bestseller list. But God's lack of lengthy and detailed instructions about marriage does not indicate He feels marriage is unimportant. Clearly, God feels that the major emphasis we humans need in order to have good marriages, to be good parents, and to be successful, caring, and responsible men and women, has everything to do with our relationship with Him through His Son, Jesus Christ. And in God's book, the Bible, He does go into a great amount of detail about how we're to relate to other people. And those same insights and commands about how we are to relate to others work beautifully in the marriage relationship. Let's look at a famous portion of the Scriptures where Paul discusses the outworking of the grace of God in our lives. And he calls this outworking the fruit of the Spirit. Paul writes, But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Paul does not say, married couples, pay attention to this and it'll help your marriage. He simply informs us that this is how Christians manifest the grace of Jesus in their lives. These character traits should be present in every believer, and he starts with love. The fruit of the Holy Spirit living in you and working in you is love. And there you have it. What could be a better foundation for any marriage than when a husband and wife consistently demonstrate love for each other? Even if you've never attended any marriage seminar, never read any book on marriage, or have never had a single marital counseling session, if you have a marriage where you both are showing love, not just feeling in love with all kinds of goosey feelings, but showing love for each other every day, you cannot help but have a happy relationship. Another of the fruits of the Spirit is joy. If you're married to a joyful person, you are far likelier to have a happy home than if you're married to a depressed, miserable, self-pitying person. Another of these fruits is peace, and peaceful people will almost always have better marriages than those who are naturally contentious and seem to almost thrive on strife and arguing. Some people are just quick to argue, quick to criticize, quick to complain, and slow to resolve their issues. But Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, and this is never more important than in marriage. Another fruit is being long-suffering, which means you'll put up with situations and with people, especially your spouse, who are less than perfect, less than ideal. They're going to say things that hurt you, and rather than rage at them, in the grace of Jesus, you respond in a kindly manner. And speaking of kindness, that is also one of the fruits of the Spirit, as is gentleness and self-control. These are also powerful marriage enhancers. I think you get the idea. God does not give detailed instructions about marriage in the Bible, but He most definitely gives detailed instructions about being a follower of Christ and relating to one another. And all His commands about how we're to treat each other will shine beautifully in the marriage relationship if followed. The number one rule for marriage is not to attend 3 seminars or read 10 books on marriage. It is to receive Jesus Christ by faith and be filled with the Holy Spirit. And then having done that, we open our Bibles and we start following God's commands and exhortations about how to treat people in general. And when we apply that directly to our marriage, a happy and blessed marriage is sure to result. And also, just as Jesus forgave you, learn to be a quick forgiver of your spouse. If you followed our ministry and YouTube channels very long, you know that we're involved in many different missions and ministries. We sponsor our popular African Jesus Conference, which is a video series of 20 different video Bible studies and teachings to train African ministers about the paramount importance of teaching and preaching Jesus, as well as personally abiding in Jesus. Benedict and I create YouTube videos of our Bible studies, and we also produce audio podcasts of these studies. I teach a weekly video devotional on all kinds of Bible topics. We sponsor free medical clinics in Africa, along with providing needed food and clothes for African widows and orphans. We need your help. Please consider donating through our link in the description below this video.